Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to a dry, jagged plateau in the middle of nowhere where a brutal sun scorches the land by day and freezing winds rattle the stone walls by night. You're standing where nearly 2,000 years ago, a small band of rebels made a decision that defied an empire and defined what it means to choose freedom over fear. The stars above are sharp as blades. The Dead Sea glimmers far below like a silent witness, and the sand beneath your feet still remembers what happened here. But be warned, this journey doesn't end with a happy sunset. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the local time. It's fun knowing who's out there listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a cliff, wind pulling at your robe, your fingers coated in a layer of fine, bone-dry dust. The rock beneath you is golden and sun-bleached, shaped by centuries of wind and forgotten footsteps. This is Masada Fortress of Echoes. Its name still rolls with weight, like a stone in the gut. You don't know it yet, but this patch of earth will be your final view of the world. Below you, the land stretches out in every direction, parched, brutal, magnificent. No cities, no rivers, just raw earth and the faint glimmer of the Dead Sea, stretching like molten glass under a sky so wide it almost feels fake. That horizon has always held danger, Romans. Mostly, you feel it before you see it. The kind of menace that makes you wake up with sweat on your back. It's the year 73C, and you've been here for nearly 2 years. You're part of the Sicarii, a splinter group of Jewish rebels. No one likes you much, not even other rebels. You're extremists, armed with short curved daggers and a certainty that unnerves even your friends. But here, isolated and high above the world, you've built something close to peace. For now, your leader is Eleazar ben Yair, intense and unshakable. He speaks with that kind of fire in the throat passion that makes you want to believe, even when part of you already knows where this is heading. His speeches are both terrifying and comforting, like thunder that somehow tells you everything's still on track. You remember his words from last night, how he spoke of Rome and slavery, and that freedom meant choosing your own ending. You didn't sleep much after that. Behind you, the fortress is a strange marriage of luxury and survival. Herod the Great, the baby-murdering king from Christmas stories, built this place decades earlier, not for war, but to party in paranoia. Indoor baths in the desert, mosaic floors, storehouses loaded with dried dates and wine, even a Roman-style sauna. It's absurd and oddly beautiful. You sometimes find yourself staring at the black and white patterns beneath your feet while chewing a fig, wondering if Herod ever imagined his spa palace would become the last refuge of zealots ready to die for a cause. Probably not. From up here, you've watched the enemy gather. It started with a few black dots in the distance, then camps, towers, siege ramps. You counted them until you lost count. 10,000 Roman soldiers. That's what they say. Veterans of Jerusalem, experts in flattening hope. They've built a wall all the way around the base of the mountain. No one gets out. No one gets in. You watch as they stack rocks into impossible shapes, forming a slope. Up the side of the mountain, Rome's final insult. Nature gave you safety. Rome gives you engineering. It's terrifying in its patience. They don't shout, don't charge. They just build, slowly, steadily, like a storm that knows it will win. You grip the rough stone of the battlements. You hear a child cry behind you. Someone sharpens a blade. A woman mutters a prayer. You think of Jerusalem, the way it burned. You think of the temple, the cries, the blood on the steps. You think of how you ran, how you hid, how you climbed this cursed place and called it safety. And now, the safety is unraveling. The night comes fast in the desert. One moment, the sky is a sheet of molten gold. The next, it's drowning in navy blue and stars. You hear the hum of insects, the scrape of sandals, the low hiss of cooking fires. Masada at night is a strange thing, beautiful, eerie, on edge. You try not to think about tomorrow. Historians still argue whether the Sicarii really had a plan when they first took Masada, or if it was just a last gasp. Some say they hoped for reinforcements that never came. Others think it was always about the message, not the outcome. You lean your head against the cool stone and close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine you're anywhere else. Somewhere green, maybe a stream, birds, but your nose still fills with dust. Your lips are cracked, and when you open your eyes, the Roman ramp is closer. You can almost hear them hammering. A scorpion skitters past your foot. Tomorrow, maybe they breach the wall. Maybe they don't. But you know one thing. They won't take you alive. You're not sure exactly when Rome became a problem for your people, but it wasn't overnight. It crept in. Like sand filling the cracks of a house you didn't notice had a hole in the roof. At first, Rome looked like order roads, aqueducts, trade. You could get a fine glass of wine from Gaul and fresh silk from the east. Not bad, right? But there was always a cost. There's always a cost. You remember being a kid, hearing your grandfather spit the name Pompey like it was a bitter herb. In 63 B.C.E., that Roman general swaggered into Jerusalem like he owned the place. He didn't destroy the temple, but he walked right into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred room in all of Judaism, like it was just another marble lobby. People never forgot that. From there, the Roman grip only tightened. They didn't care about your laws, your customs, your Sabbath. They propped up kings like Herod, who felt more Roman than Jewish. He taxed your family into exhaustion just to build theaters and palaces. He even rebuilt the temple, sure, but more to impress Caesar than to honor God. And the Roman governors don't get started. Men like Pontius Pilate, yes, that Pilate were cruel, arrogant, and so out of touch they made Herod look like a hometown hero. They'd crucify 20 people before lunch, then ask why the locals seemed a bit tense. By the time you're grown, that tension has become unbearable. Tax collectors swarm like flies. Roman soldiers push through the streets, armored and armed, always looking down on you. Literally, they're taller, or maybe that's just how it feels. You remember one day, standing in the market, when a young rebel stood on a crate and shouted about revolution. He said God would deliver you. He said the Romans were thieves and pigs. He got dragged off within minutes, blood on his face. You looked away, but something in you changed. Then came the whispers. All across Judea, people murmured about revolt. Not just the Sicarii, but others Pharisees, zealots, Essenes, even regular folks who'd never picked up a sword. It was like dry brush waiting for a spark. And in 66 CE, that spark finally came. It started in Caesarea. A Roman official disrespected a synagogue, and the people snapped. Riots spread like wildfire. You joined up before the dust settled. You remember the first time you held a real weapon, how heavy it felt, how right. Jerusalem rose up. You marched beside thousands, singing psalms, eyes burning with faith. And somehow, for a moment, it worked. You actually drove out the Roman garrison. Judea was free for a breath. Anyway, but Rome wasn't going to shrug and let you go. No empire does. They sent Vespasian, a general with ice in his veins. Then Titus, his son. When they showed up, they didn't fight with rage. They fought with strategy, precision. They didn't just want to beat you, they wanted to make an example. Siege after siege, village after village. You saw what they did to Jotapata, to Gamla. Walls crushed, civilians slaughtered, survivors crucified in rows like some kind of sick gallery. You smelled the rot before you reached the gates. You still do, sometimes, when you close your eyes. By 70 C, Jerusalem was surrounded. You fought tooth and nail, house to house, brick to brick, and the temple, the heart of your world, burned. Its gold melted down the stones like tears of fire. You stood in the alleyway and watched the sky glow red. Your city screamed. Some historians still argue whether the temple's destruction was a calculated Roman blow or a fire that got out of control. Doesn't really matter to you. It burned. That's what matters. You fled with your comrades, with your family, those who were left. You moved under cover of darkness, through the Judean hills, past burned farms and picked over corpses. Eventually, you made it to Masada, a fortress no army had ever taken, built by Herod. Remember, he had paranoia money. At first, Masada felt like a second chance. You had water, food, defenses. You had space to breathe. The Dead Sea shimmered below like some upside-down heaven. You told yourself you could make it, that maybe, just maybe, Rome would stop caring. But Rome never stops caring. You saw the first scouting parties weeks later. Then came the camps, and you knew they weren't letting this go. Now, you spend your days watching the mountain's base like a hawk. The enemy builds in silence, but every stone they place is like thunder in your chest. Their siege ramp grows daily. It cuts across the natural slope like a scar. That thing doesn't blink, doesn't rest. It's just there, getting closer. You've heard some say the Romans are doing this not just to end the war, but to end the idea of resistance. Masada is symbolic now. If they break you, they break the myth, the last ember of rebellion, crushed under a Roman boot. And so, the men train, the women gather food and whisper prayers. Children draw pictures on dusty stone floors, too young to understand what's coming. You sharpen your blade and pretend it matters. A quirky bit of trivia: Herod built not one, not two, but 3 palaces here stacked like a wedding cake on the north face. One for entertaining guests, one for escaping assassins, and one just because. You walk past their ruins sometimes, mosaics still catching bits of sunlight, feels almost obscene now, like laughter at a funeral. And each night, you climb the walls and look out. That ring of fire the Roman camps lit up under the stars. It's like you're the last candle in a dark room, flickering, waiting. And one night, as you lean on the stones, you hear a strange sound, a rhythm, faint but steady. Not drums, not tools. It's Roman soldiers marching uphill. They're almost here. You wake to shouting. Not panic, just routine. It's always like this now. Someone spots a new section of the Roman ramp. Someone else sees a tower shift. Or maybe the engineers have started pushing that siege engine forward again. You don't even flinch anymore. You just roll out of the makeshift bedding, brush dust from your arms, and blink at the endless beige of the desert dawn. The air tastes dry, metallic. Somewhere, someone is baking flatbread. The scent is comforting, but you know it's one of the last batches. Supplies are low, and the goats are growing thinner. Your ration of water is half what it used to be. Still, everyone pretends. The women smile through chapped lips. The children hum songs out of tune. You nod, say nothing. Back when the revolt began, you were a fighter. Today, you're just surviving. It's hard to remember how the rebellion started with so much hope. Remember that fire in Jerusalem, the wild belief that the people, your people, could throw off Rome like dust from sandals. You were ready to die for it. But what no one tells you is that the fire of freedom burns fast, and when it fades, you're left with smoke, hunger, and waiting. Eleazar ben Yair still speaks like it's day one. His voice hasn't wavered. He walks the walls, speaks to the men in whispers and roars, depending on what the day demands. He tells you that Rome can break bodies, but not souls, that Masada will be remembered. And maybe he's right, but you notice his eyes flick toward the ramp more often now. Historians still debate how many people are here. 960, maybe including women and children. Not all fighters, but all believers, at least outwardly. Some days, you wonder how many hearts have quietly changed. No one says it aloud, of course, but you hear it in the silence between words. You help a boy gather stones for the wall. He's 10, maybe 11, talks too much, asks too many questions, like why the Romans wear skirts, and if eagles can carry messages. You laugh, but softly. He doesn't know how close he is to becoming part of a story no one escapes. That's when you see it. The tower, a wooden beast, creaking its way up the siege ramp. It looms over the slope like a giant on wheels, cloaked in wet hides to protect it from fire. Slowly, inch by inch, it rises. The whole fortress watches in eerie silence. Someone starts a psalm, low and quivering. Others join. You don't. The tower is Rome's final word. Once it reaches the wall, they'll breach. And when that happens, there's no more pretending. They'll come in fast, efficient, the way they always do. They won't spare the old or the young. Rome doesn't do second chances. You retreat to the northern palace ruins. Somewhere deep in the storerooms, you find a stash of preserved dates. Probably forgotten. You pocket a few, leave the rest. The sweetness stings your tongue. You think of the last feast you had here, a real one. Music, dancing, laughter. Eleazar made a speech about hope, and for a moment, it didn't feel like a siege, just a community above the world. And now that joy feels like a different lifetime, another person's memory. As the sun sinks, the shadows stretch long across the stone. Fires flicker. You sit with a few others in the common room. Stone walls painted with faint remnants of Herod's grandeur. Reds, blues faded but still proud. The conversation is soft, deliberate. No one mentions the tower. Instead, someone tells a story about a wedding that once happened here. A Sicarii soldier fell in love with a widow. They married with date wine and borrowed jewelry. The whole fortress danced. The story ends in silence. No one asks where they are now. The quiet is interrupted by Eleazar. He stands in the archway, arms folded, his face unreadable. He doesn't raise his voice. He just says it's time to talk. You follow him up the steps, past the cisterns, the storerooms, the sleeping children. You see the Roman camps flickering like angry fireflies. The siege tower is nearly halfway up now. Eleazar gathers the men in the upper courtyard. The wind howls across the plateau, but he doesn't speak until it fades. Then he says this tomorrow. They will break through. No one argues. He goes on. He speaks of dignity, of choice, of the ancient martyrs, of Saul on Mount Gilboa, who fell on his own sword rather than be captured, of Samson, who brought down a temple to destroy his enemies, of your ancestors in Egypt, who once chose the desert over chains. And then he says it plainly. We choose death on our own terms. The words hit like falling stones. There is no screaming, no chaos, just a collective stillness, the kind that happens when the unthinkable becomes real. You look around. Some nod. Some close their eyes. One man weeps. The decision isn't forced, not exactly, but it's made, quietly, collectively, like a tide turning. You return to your corner of the fortress. The wind is colder now. You wrap your cloak tighter. Somewhere nearby, someone sings a lullaby, not for a child, for themselves. You think about your name. Will anyone say it again after tomorrow? Will it be remembered or just lost in the dust? Somewhere below, the Roman tower creaks another step forward. You don't sleep. How could you, even with the stars blanketing the sky like scattered embers? Even with the wind whispering across the desert in long, lonesome sighs, your eyes refuse to close. You lie on your back, staring at the wooden beams above your head, counting every creak like it's a heartbeat. The darkness feels thicker tonight, heavier, as if it knows what tomorrow brings. You rise before the sun does. The camp is quiet, eerily so. No footsteps, no sparring, just the soft rustle of robes and the distant crackle of firewood. A child stirs near the entrance to the southern quarters. His mother hushes him gently, her voice a song with no melody. There's a gathering near the main hall. You recognize most of the faces: fighters, teachers, shepherds, mothers, people you've lived with for years now. You remember when one of them broke his leg on a patrol. Another taught your little cousin how to read. These aren't rebels. They're neighbors, family. Eleazar is there again. He doesn't pace, doesn't shout. He speaks in low, calm tones. His words are careful, weighted. We do this because we are free, he says. He explains the plan in measured detail. Each man will take responsibility for his own family. Once the women and children are gone, 10 men will be chosen to take the rest. Then, from those 10, one will be chosen to carry out the final act. Afterward, he will fall on his own blade. One death, one story, one memory. You feel sick, not angry, not afraid, just hollow, like your body's moving and your mind is lagging a few paces behind. Historians still argue whether this account is literal, embellished, or even fabricated. Some say Josephus, the Roman Jewish historian who first told this story, exaggerated it for drama. Others believe it happened exactly this way. You're not sure it matters. For you, it's not legend, it's reality. The hours pass in a haze. You find yourself collecting water with a girl who used to sneak figs from the storerooms. She hands you a cup and says nothing. Later, you help an elder sharpen a dull blade. Neither of you talk about why. You catch a strange smell oils. Maybe someone is preparing bodies for burial before they've even died. The wind kicks up again. Sand swirls along the edges of the fortress. The sun hangs low, bleeding orange and crimson across the horizon. Everything feels like it's on fire. Even the rocks look like they're glowing. Dinner is quiet. Bread, a few olives, some dried goat meat. You chew slowly, tasting everything like it's the last time, because it is. A man nearby begins reciting psalms. His voice trembles but doesn't break. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he stops, eyes wet. You place a hand on his shoulder, no words needed. As darkness settles, a strange peace descends, not calm, exactly, but resignation, like a play nearing its final act. You head toward the northern wall, where a group has gathered. You want to see the tower again. One last look. There it is, just feet away from the outer defenses. Massive, inevitable. You wonder if the soldiers inside know what's happening up here. Do they joke? Do they feel proud? Do they know you're not afraid? Someone beside you murmurs a final prayer. Someone else lights a small oil lamp. It flickers in the wind, refusing to die. You go back inside. The courtyard has changed. Torches burn. The 10 men have been chosen. Stones marked with names drawn at random. They say, you weren't picked. You feel something between relief and guilt. The women are gathered first, mothers holding children close, grandmothers wrapped in shawls. No screaming, no wailing, just a hush that sinks deep into your bones. You don't watch what happens next. You can't. You stare at the wall, counting the cracks, the stains, anything but the eyes around you. One by one, the men take up their roles. You feel your heart beating so loud it echoes in your ears. A man passes you, sword in hand, face pale. Another kneels, whispering to the earth. You wonder what he's saying. A goodbye, a prayer, a memory. A quirky detail slips into your mind, maybe, as a distraction. Masada's name comes from the Hebrew word for fortress, Metsuda. Fitting, isn't it? This was supposed to be the safest place in the land, the last stronghold, the untouchable tower, and now it's a tomb. You retreat to a quiet corner. The last sounds you hear are not screams. They are whispers, rustling robes, a blade hitting stone, and then silence, long, heavy, unreal. You don't know how long you stay curled in that room, hands wrapped around your knees, eyes wide but unseeing. Hours, maybe, until the torch burns low and the scent of oil thickens, until even the sound of your own breath feels like too much. Then footsteps, Roman, slow, deliberate. You hold still, barely breathe. They don't yell, don't smash or plunder. They walk in and stop. You hear one of them curse under his breath. Another makes a soft, startled sound, almost a gasp. They expected a fight, a massacre. Blood splattered across the walls, screams echoing through the halls. What they find is stillness, rows of bodies, some still clutching one another, children with eyes closed, arms folded, and silence. You sneak a glance. The Roman in the front stares around, helmet under one arm, face tight. He looks less like a conqueror and more like a man who stepped into a ghost story. No treasure, no glory, just the weight of what happened here. Later, they'll try to figure it out. Count the dead. Question the survivors, yes. A handful survived, hiding in the cisterns. They'll tell the story, and it will spread. Masada will become legend. But right now, it's just quiet. You close your eyes and wait for morning. When the sun finally rises, it's reluctant, like even the sky isn't ready to face what happened here. You're still alive, hidden deep in the cisterns with a few others. Your body aches from crouching. Your throat is raw, your breath stale. You listen first for footsteps, then voices. Nothing. Eventually, someone nearby whispers, "It's done." Not a question, a fact, and you nod, because there's no other response. You wait another hour, maybe two, before you dare emerge. The stairs up from the cistern are steep and cold, carved right into the stone. They wind like a tunnel to another world. And for a moment, you almost turn back. But something makes you climb. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's duty. Maybe you just need to know it's real. The air outside is warm, but you feel none of it. You step into a courtyard bathed in sunlight and silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that wraps around you like a shroud. You see them, lying in groups, some side by side, some alone, some still clutching what they refused to let go of: blankets, charms, tiny wooden toys. It's quiet except for the occasional chirp of a bird. Completely unaware it's singing above a graveyard. You walk through what remains. The bakery still smells faintly of yeast. The forge is cold. A pitcher of water sits untouched on a table. You notice the detail of a painted wall still vibrant. Deep red, almost defiant. Herod's palace, reduced from opulence to aftermath. One of the Romans sees you. You freeze, but he doesn't reach for his weapon. He doesn't shout. He just stares at you, like you're the last ghost left in a place too full of them already. Eventually, they gather the survivors, just 2 women and 5 children. According to some records, you're not sure if you're counted among them. You don't care. You're just there, breathing, watching. One soldier asks what happened, and a woman answers. She tells them everything. About Eleazar's final speech, about the drawing of lots, about the final sword. She speaks without trembling, as if each word is carved into her bones. The Romans listen. They don't interrupt. When she finishes, no one moves. Historians still debate her identity. Was she the wife of one of the commanders, a teacher, just someone who knew how to hide in silence? Whoever she was, her words survive, and because of her, so does the story. You leave Masada with the others under Roman escort. No chains, no jeers, just a strange, heavy reverence. The Roman general Lucius Flavius Silva orders the bodies left undisturbed. There's nothing to be gained, no parade, no victory feast, just the echo of what they thought would be conquest, and what became something else entirely. You trudge down the ramp, that long, dusty scar carved into the side of the mountain, the very thing that took months to build and minutes to defeat. At the bottom, you look back. Masada stands tall, regal even in ruin, its walls shattered, its people gone but not forgotten. Not by you. A funny thing, Masada wasn't even supposed to be yours. It was Herod's, built for a king who never faced a real siege. It had water reserves, food storage, luxury baths. He planned for every danger, except time. And now it belongs to the dead, not the royal. As you walk, the desert opens around you, vast, relentless. Every step forward feels like walking through someone else's dream, one soaked in blood, but stitched with defiance. There's a moment you pause, hand against a rock, sweat dripping down your temple, and you realize you're not angry. You're not even sad, not in the way you thought you'd be. You're proud, not of what happened, but why it did. You understand, now, what Eleazar meant. The Romans didn't get their victory. They got silence, emptiness, a fortress they climbed for months to reach, only to find they'd arrived too late. And you carry the story. You hear it in the wind. You see it in the face of every Roman who won't meet your eyes. You feel it in the way the other survivors stay close, like orbiting moons of a shared loss. You reach a small village days later. They give you bread, water, a place to sit. You tell them what happened. And again, you see the silence that follows. No one cheers, no one weeps. They just listen, and then the whispers begin. Masada, a place where free people died free, where no chains clinked, where no captives knelt. Some call it madness, others bravery. You don't correct either of them. Truth doesn't always wear one face. Here's a quirky twist years from now. Some modern archaeologists will try to match Josephus's story with physical evidence. They'll uncover skeletons, pottery, coins, but they won't find all the answers. One scholar will argue the mass suicide was exaggerated. Another will say, no, this place speaks for itself. But none of them will know what it smelled like, what it felt like. The warmth of the stone as the sun set, the hush of 1,000 final prayers, the weight of a choice no one should ever have to make, you know. And so, you keep walking. Every footstep echoes louder than any Roman horn ever did. Masada may have fallen, but the story still stands, and so do you. You make it back to Jerusalem, though nothing feels the same anymore. The city is quieter than you remember, staying not silent like Masada, but subdued, as if grief lingers in the walls, in the gaps between market stalls, in the very rhythm of the streets. You pass people who look away when you approach, not out of shame or contempt, but because they recognize something in your eyes, something burned in. You're not the only one who's returned from somewhere impossible. In hushed corners of shops and behind shaded doors, whispers rise like smoke. Did you hear what they did? All of those, even the children. No one believes it at first. Then someone mentions Eleazar. Someone else saw the Roman ramp. Bit by bit, the facts spread. Masada becomes more than a name. It becomes a warning, a symbol, a defiant whisper passed through clenched teeth. You find work, simple work, repairing sandals, patching cloaks. Your hands are steady, but your mind drifts. Every stitch feels like penance, every frayed hem a memory. Then one day, a boy asks you, "Were you really there?" And just like that, it begins again. You tell him the truth, not the dramatized version already beginning to circulate among the zealots and traitors. You tell him about the quiet, the oil lamps, the coins used for drawing lots. You tell him about the woman who stood tall when everything else fell, the little girl clutching a carved goat. The moment the Romans arrived to find no one left to conquer, the boy listens, eyes wide, not blinking. When you're done, he asks nothing. He just sits there, still, heavy with understanding. You see that again and again over the years. Listeners drawn in, held breathless by what you survived. But none can fully grasp it. How could they? Sometimes you envy them, but mostly you feel protective. This story, brutal as it is, now belongs to you. You carry it like a torch through a windstorm, fragile, flickering but never out. Historians still argue what really happened at Masada. Some believe Josephus used it as anti-Roman propaganda, inflating the tale to cast Jewish resistance in a noble light. Others question how a single woman and a few children could remember such detailed speeches. But those arguments feel hollow to you, because truth isn't always carved in marble. Sometimes it's carried in scars. You learn that others who escaped Jerusalem after the Second Temple's destruction have found their own havens, caves, small settlements. A few made it to Alexandria. Even fewer ventured north to Antioch. But wherever they went, the name Masada followed. A few zealots try to use the story for recruitment. "We'll be like Masada," they shout in alleys, raising fists. You want to tell them they don't understand, that it wasn't about glory or spectacle, that no one there wanted to die. They simply refused to live as anything less than free. But you hold your tongue. Let them have their slogans. You know the truth is more complicated and far quieter. One day, you meet a Roman soldier in a tavern. He's older, his armor traded for a tunic, hands thick with calluses from farming instead of war. You recognize the tattoo on his arm, the mark of the 10th Legion. He recognizes you too. There's a long silence between you. And then he says, "I was there. I saw it." You nod. "So did I." He looks into his mug, then mutters, "We didn't expect it. All that building, all that effort. And when we got there, nothing, just death." You sip your water and say nothing. "I still think about it," he continues, quieter now. The way it felt walking in. It didn't feel like victory. It felt wrong. He leaves without another word. And for the first time, you realize that Masada didn't only haunt the survivors. It haunted the conquerors too. Years pass. The fortress begins to crumble in places. Sand buries paths, once walked by 1,000 feet. But somehow, it endures. Pilgrims begin to visit, guided by rumor and reverence. Some climb just to stand where Eleazar once spoke. Others leave stones on the ground, small tributes to a silence that still echoes. A quirky little note surfaces in your mind one day. Masada had storehouses big enough to last years. Tons of grain, dried fruits, wine. Enough to survive a siege longer than most wars. The irony never leaves you that they had the means to live, yet chose death. But that's what makes it unforgettable. It wasn't necessity, it was intention. Even as you grow old, your body slow, your mind sharp. The memory of that final night stays crisp, like a scar that never fades, but stops hurting, mostly. One evening, a caravan from Galilee arrives. A young girl approaches you with a scroll. My uncle says you knew Masada. You nod, eyes on the parchment. We're writing everything down, she says, so people don't forget. You don't cry, not visibly, but something in you softens, because your story will live, and if it lives, then so do they. You never planned to become a storyteller, but here you are decades later, still recounting the dust and fire of Masada like it happened yesterday. The cadence of Eleazar's voice, the cold bite of night air before the end, the silence afterward, louder than screams. You settle in a hillside village where the wind carries less sand and the people carry less sorrow. But whenever travelers come through, someone eventually points to you. That's the one from Masada. At first, you resist. You keep to yourself, letting the memories age like old fruit, sweeter and stranger with time. But it doesn't last, because the questions always come. Did they really do it? How did it feel? Would you do the same? You give them what you can. The truth, wrapped in humility. I don't know what I would do now. I only know what we did then. Some nod, some argue. One man young, eager, insists it was all cowardice, a waste of lives. They should have fought to the end. He says, taken the Romans with them. You raise an eyebrow. We did fight for 3 years. Then we chose not to be conquered. That quiets him, mostly, but it makes you think. Not everyone will understand Masada. Some will see it as defiance, others as despair. But maybe that's what makes it powerful. It's not neat. It's not easy. It's human. One day, you walk with a friend to the cliffs outside your village. The sun is setting, casting gold across the rocks like it used to on Masada's walls. You look east, toward where the Dead Sea shimmers like glass, and for a second, you can almost smell the desert wind again. That dry, scorched breath of a mountain that swallowed nearly 1,000 souls. You mentioned something that always struck you, how the Roman ramp, the symbol of their might and strategy, is still there, still visible, generations later. It outlives its builders, but the memory of the resistance outlives it. You wonder if any of the Romans ever felt pride when they looked back at Masada, or if it haunted them in their tents, creeping in like smoke, a victory without triumph, a siege without spoils. Historians still debate the psychology of it. Was Masada's final act a communal suicide, a martyrdom, a protest? Some dig deep into Josephus's motives, claiming he shaped the tale to flatter Roman sensibilities or draw sympathy to the Jewish plight. Others argue he exaggerated to sell copies, so to speak. But again, you were there, and you remember the faces. You remember how quiet everyone was, not terrified, not wild, just resolved. You remember mothers whispering lullabies, fathers kissing foreheads. You remember the warmth of hands held too long, the strange dignity of it all, not madness, something else. You once read a fragment from a Babylonian traveler who claimed Masada was cursed, that the earth itself trembled at what happened there, that no vegetation grew near its base for decades. You don't believe in curses, but you do believe in echoes. And Masada echoes. You hear it in how people say the name, not shouted, not sung, whispered, like prayer or warning, even as the Roman Empire changes, softens, and stumbles through time. Masada grows stronger in story. New rebellions mention it. New scrolls reference it. It becomes a symbol no empire can erase. One night, an old soldier visits your village. His beard is white, his walk uneven. You recognize his eyes, they've seen the same things. He sits beside you without introduction. You talk for hours. Do you think they were brave? He finally asks. You shrug. I think they were ready. He nods, doesn't speak for a while. Then he says something you never forget. We were trained to conquer, but we weren't prepared for that. And that's the thing, isn't it? The Romans were ready for a fight, but they weren't ready to face people who fought in a different way, who said, you can have the rocks, the walls, the empty city, but you can't have us. Later that year, a group of young scribes invites you to speak. You sit in the middle of their circle, the fire crackling low, faces lit by amber flame. You start talking and they don't blink. They hardly breathe. You tell them about the little boy who didn't cry when his father handed him a carved bird and said goodbye. You tell them about the man who laughed as he lit the oil lamps one last time, just to make it feel like home. You tell them about how death wasn't the end, because stories last longer than swords. The fire dies low, the night deepens, and when it's over, no one moves. Not right away. They just sit there, part of something larger than themselves. A quirky side note you once heard. A small group of Roman engineers who built the ramp left behind sketches in a cave, cartoonish images of themselves, bored and waiting for orders. You always found that fascinating. They were building a siege weapon and doodling, even in the middle of history. People are just people. It comforts you. Somehow, that humanity persists foolish, clever, tender, proud even at the edge of catastrophe. You still walk the hills sometimes, still talk to those who will listen. You're old now, but you're not done. Not yet, because Masada isn't done either. It rises again in every act of quiet courage, every refusal to bend, every whispered name of someone who didn't survive, but made sure the world knew why. And that makes you smile, because memory is a kind of rebellion too. You wake early now before the birds, before the market stalls creak open. There's comfort in those dim hours, when the world still feels half asleep and the past presses close. This morning, your knees ache more than usual. Your hands don't obey quite like they used to, but your mind sharp as ever. You rise, stretch, and wrap yourself in the same wool cloak you've worn for years. The edges are frayed, the color faded, but it's yours. Just like the memories, you head to the outskirts of the village, where a low stone bench waits beneath an olive tree. A favorite spot. You can see the hills from here. Imagine Masada somewhere far south, its jagged crown touching the sky. Most people avoid the topic now. Masada has become a tale for scrolls and scholars, but you still feel it in your bones, like a heartbeat that never stops. And today, something stirs. A boy runs toward you, breathless, a caravan from Rome. He says, they want to speak to you. You blink. He nods. They said they're collecting truths. You chuckle, a dangerous thing to collect. Still, you follow. At the edge of the town, a tent flaps lazily in the breeze. Inside, A woman with silver rings on her fingers greets you. She says she's part of an imperial record-keeping project, preserving accounts of Roman history from every corner of the empire. She asks you to talk about Masada. You hesitate, then you nod, but you don't give them Josephus. You don't give them tidy speeches or heroic platitudes. You give them the real story. You tell them about the dusty sandals, the broken pottery, the look in the eyes of a mother who knew her time had run out. You tell them about how, in the end, the thing people clung to most wasn't vengeance or defiance, but dignity. The woman scribbles quickly, pausing only to meet your gaze once. Was it worth it, she asks? You lean back. Let the question float. I don't know. You answer, but it mattered. And maybe that's the better question anyway, because worth implies success, a ledger, a tally of gains. But mattering, that's about meaning. And Masada mattered. It still does. Historians still argue whether the final act at Masada was real or constructed. Some say no such mass suicide could have been carried out in that orderly a fashion. Others counter that cultural concepts of martyrdom and honor in first century Judea were far different than today. You don't bother debating anymore. Let them argue. You were there. You remember the stars overhead, too many to count, the wind that carried the smell of fire and iron. You remember the men drawing lots with their names on shards, each one a whisper of finality. You remember handing your shard to a man whose hands trembled more than yours. You remember letting go, and somehow what you held on to came back stronger. Years pass. The empire shifts. Emperors come and go. New taxes, new wars. But every once in a while, you hear the name again, Masada, spoken by a merchant, etched in the corner of a scroll, shouted at a protest in a far-off city. It surprises you how far it travels. Once, you receive a letter from someone in Alexandria. He writes of a theater group performing a reenactment of the final night. He asks, "Was it like this?" You don't answer, not because you're unkind, but because no stage, no script, no flickering torchlight could replicate what it was like to feel your entire world choose silence over slavery. Eventually, your steps grow smaller. You walk with a stick now, but the story stays close. You've passed it down first to curious children, then to students, then to strangers. It will outlive you. On your last walk to the old stone bench, the hills feel especially still. You sit, close your eyes, and for a moment, you're back. Not in fear, not in fire, but in the quiet, that sacred, defiant quiet. It cradled you then. It carries you now, and far away. The ramp still rises toward an empty gate. The wind still sings through the broken walls. The stones still whisper their truth to those who will listen. And as long as someone listens, they are not forgotten. You rest now. Let your breath slow and deepen, like the dusk settling across desert stone. Let the voices of the past fade into a gentle hush. They're not gone, just quieter now, tucked into the folds of history, like a letter you once read by candlelight. Picture that mountaintop under stars, no noise, no war, no judgment, just stillness. You are there again, but not as a fighter, not as a witness, as something softer, a listener, a dreamer, a guardian of memory. The fires have gone out. The siege towers are dust. But the story, your story, lingers in the cool air. It drifts like incense, Warm and ancient, it curls around you and reminds you that every life, no matter how fleeting, leaves something behind. A choice, a name, a whisper. So let yourself drift now. Let the ramparts fall away. Let the cracked stone and dry wind become the rhythm of your breath. Safe, calm, carried. The voices may argue, the scholars may dissect, but deep inside, you know the truth. It's not in the scrolls, it's in the silence that followed, the silence you survived, and in that silence, you find peace. The story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.